me, Hairyett, which must mean that today is Monday, and Mondays are fun days, exactly. And why should this Monday be any different? Well, I hope you're comfortable and you're ready to listen to another beautiful story on a Monday afternoon, because I am so super excited for this one. This one is called Snow White and Rose Red. It's not the same Snow White that's in the story with the 7 dwarfs, but there is also a dwarf in this story, and her name is Snow White, and she does have snow white skin. So maybe somehow the two characters were used for 2 stories. I don't know, something to think about. Anyway, what are we waiting for? Let's just go for it. Okay. Once upon a time there was a poor widow who lived in a lonely cottage in the middle of a beautiful forest. In front of the cottage was a garden, and in the garden stood 2 rose bushes, one that bore white roses and one that bore red roses. She also had 2 beautiful children who were like the 2 rose trees, and one was called Snow White and one was called Rose Red. And they were good children. They were happy children and busy and cheerful, and they were always playing together and running about in the meadows and fields, seeking flowers and catching butterflies. Snow White was much more gentle and quiet, and Rose Red, she was busy and full of energy. Rose Red was always out and about, and Snow White, well, she liked to stay at home and help her mother and read her mother stories when there was nothing else to do, because they were always doing chores. The 2 children were also very, very good friends. They were sisters and they loved each other very much. When they went outside, they always held each other's hands. And Snow White would always say to Rose Red, "We will never leave each other." And Rose Red would always answer, "Never so long as we live." And their mother would always add, "What one has, she must share with the other." They often ran about the forest alone, and they gathered red berries, and no animals in the forest they ever did them any harm. They loved the 2 girls, and they were very trusting of them. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands, and the deer would graze nearby, and the squirrels would leap merrily about, and the birds would sing sweet songs in the trees. Snow White and Rose Red also kept their mother's cottage so super clean and neat, and it was such a pleasure to go inside there. In the summer, Rose Red's job was to take care of the house, and every morning she would lay a beautiful little bunch of fresh flowers at the bottom of her mother's bed, and each time she did this, she put 1 rose that was white and 1 rose that was red. And in the winter time, Snow White was in charge of looking after the fireplace and bringing wood to the fire and making lots and lots of warm soups and teas and hanging the nice brass kettle next to the fire. They would all love to sit around the fire in winter time, and Mother would put on her little specs and she would read them stories. And by the fire would lie their little lamb, who was their pet, and outside the little white doves would sit with their little heads underneath their wings listening to the stories. Now one evening there was a knock at the door, and the voice on the other side was saying that he wanted to be let inside. The mother said, "Quick, Rose Red, go and open the door. It must be a traveler who is seeking shelter because it's so cold outside." Rose Red went. She pushed back the bolt, thinking that it was a poor man, but it was not. It was a bear that stretched his broad black head within inside the door. Rose Red screamed and she sprang back, and the lamb bleated, "Woo!" and the dove fluttered its wings, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak, and he said, "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm. I am half frozen and only want to warm myself a little beside your fire." "Poor bear," said the mother. "Please lie down by the fire. Only take care that you do not burn your bear coat." And then she cried, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear will do you no harm. He means well." So they both came out, and by the lamb and the dove also came nearer, and they were not afraid of him. The bear said, "Here, children, knock the snow out of my coat a little." And they brought the broom and they swept the bear's hide clean, and he stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly. And then the girls soon became friends with the bear, and they played games with him. They tugged at his hair with their hands, and they put their feet upon his back, and they rolled him about, and when he growled, they burst into laughter. But the bear was super friendly, and no matter how hard they tugged at his coat or stood on his back, he took it all with a good heart. And only when they were too rough, he would call out, "Oh, leave me alive, children." When it was bedtime, and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You can lie there by the fire, and then you will be safe from the cold in the bad weather." As soon as the day dawned and the sun came up in the sky, it was time for the bear to go. And the two children, they let him out, and he trotted across the snow and off into the forest. And after that, the bear came back every evening at the same time. He laid himself down by the fire, and he let the children amuse themselves with him as much as they liked. And they got so used to him that the doors were never locked until their grizzly furry friend had arrived. When spring had come and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow White, "Now I must go away, and I cannot come back for the whole of the summer." "Where are you going, dear bear?" asked Snow White, who was super fond of him. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are forced to stay down below the ground and cannot work their way through. But now, when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it and come out and pry and steal. And once they have your treasures in their hands and into their caves, you will never see them again." Snow White was quite sorry to see him leave, and as she bolted the door for him and the bear was hurrying out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off. And it seemed to Snow White as if she'd seen a little bit of gold shining through it. But she was not sure about it. The bear ran away quickly, and soon he was out of sight behind the trees. A short time afterwards, the mother sent her children into the forest to get some firewood. There, they found a big tree that lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk, something was jumping backwards and forwards in the grass. They could not make out what it was. When they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a snow-white beard about 1 meter long. The end of the beard was caught in a crevice in the tree, and the little fellow was jumping about like a person that's being stung by bees, and it was clear that he did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come and help me? What are you up to, huh? Just standing there?" "Oh, I'm so sorry," said Rose Red. What are you doing here? How did this happen?" "You stupid prying goose," answered the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree to get a little wood for cooking, and the little bit of food that we get is always burnt up with heavy logs. We do not swallow so much as you greedy folk. I just wanted a little bit, and I just driven the wedge safely in, and everything was going as I wished, but the cursed wedge was too smooth and suddenly sprang out, and the tree closed so quickly, and I could not pull out my beautiful white beard. So now it is tight, and I cannot get away, and you silly, sleek, milk-faced things laugh at me. Ugh, how horrible you are." The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out. It was caught too fast. "I will run and fetch someone," said Rose Red. "You senseless goose," snarled the dwarf. "Why would you fetch someone? You are already too many for me. Can you not think of something better?" "Don't be impatient," said Snow White. "I will help you." And she pulled her scissors out of her pocket and cut off the end of his beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag which lay amongst the roots of the tree, and which was full of gold. And he lifted it up, grumbling to himself, Uncivilized people to cut off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to you. And he spat on the ground. And he swung the bag upon his back and he went off without even looking back once at the children and not even saying thank you. Some time afterwards, Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a dish of fish. As they came near the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping towards the water as if it was going to leap in. They ran to it and they found it was the dwarf again. "Where are you going?" asked Rose Red. "You surely don't want to go into the water." "I am not such a fool," cried the dwarf. "Don't you see that the horrible fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had tangled up his beard with the fishing line. And a moment later, a big fish made a bite, and the feeble little man had not the strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and pulled the dwarf towards him. He held on to all the reeds and bushes, but it was no good, for he was forced to follow the movements of the fish and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. The girls came just in time. They held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but all in vain. Beard and line were entangled fast together. There was nothing to do but bring out the scissors again and cut the beard. And another small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw this, he screamed out, "Is that nice, you toadstool, to disfigure a man's face? Wasn't it enough to clip off the end of my beard? Now you've cut off the best part of it. I cannot let myself be seen by my people. I wish you would turn into a toad and be covered by warts." And then he took out a sack of pearls, which lay in the rushes, and without another word, he dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. It happened soon afterwards. The mother sent 2 children to buy stuff from town. She wanted them to get a needle and some laces and ribbons. The road led them to a beautiful giant field full of flowers, and on this field were huge pieces of rock just lying about. There they noticed a large big bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and around. It sank lower and lower, and at last settled near a rock not so far away. Immediately they heard a loud, piteous cry, and they ran up and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children felt super sorry for him, and they quickly took tight hold of the little man and pulled against the eagle so long that at last he let his prize go. As soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright, he cried with his shrill voice, "Could you not have done it more carefully? You dragged at my brown coat so it is all torn and full of holes, you clumsy creatures." Then he took up a sack of precious stones and slipped away again under the rock into his hole. The girls, who by this time were used to his ingratitude, went on their way and did their business in town. As they crossed the field again on their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones in a clearing in the forest. And he didn't think anybody would be coming by so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones, and they glittered and sparkled with all colors so beautiful that the children just stood and stared at them. "Why do you stand gaping there?" cried the dwarf, and his ashen grey face became copper red with rage. He was still cursing when a loud growling noise was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in fright, but he could not reach his cave, for the bear was already close. And then, in the dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me. I will give you all my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What do you want with such a slender little fellow as I? You could not even feel me between your teeth. Come, take these 2 wicked girls. They are tender morsels for you, fat as young quails. For mercy's sake, eat them, not me." The bear took no notice of his words, and gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. And then you know what happened? Suddenly, the whole bear suit or skin dropped off, and underneath was a beautiful man wearing a gold suit. He said, "I am not a bear. I am actually a prince. And that wicked dwarf, he put a spell on me, a curse, and I turned into a bear, and I was left wandering around the forest at nights." Well, the girls couldn't believe their eyes. The prince then said, "Snow White, I have always loved you. Will you be my wife?" And she said, "Yes, of course I would love that, but don't worry. He had a brother, and that's who Rose Red married. And they shared all their beautiful treasures together, and they lived in a castle on the hill, and their beautiful mother, she got to live there too. But she didn't forget, before she moved into the palace, to take along her 2 favorite rose bushes. One Rose Red and one Snow White. And they lived happily ever after. Isn't that a wonderful story? Such a wonderful story. What a wicked little dwarf. He was not a nice guy. He was just so rude. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. You can go and find it too. I think it's a great one to keep. Or you can just watch this many times. Don't forget to press like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We think you're a wonderful friend, so have a wonderful week. Check out the other stories, Monday to Friday rather, not Monday to Thursday. There's one every day. And then on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Super fun, super cool. Hope you have a wonderful week. Toodaloo!